Welcome to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. I am Jason Whitlock, your host. Happy Wednesday. Awesome show planned for you today. It's going to be a long show. Buckle up. We're going to go old school and hear from a bunch of our contributors, and we're going to have some Tennessee Harmony at the end of this. So buckle up. Awesome show. Hope you're ready for this. I'm ready to unleash a fire starter, and then we'll have Shemeka, Maj Toure, Delano, and Royce White come in and fan the flames. It's going to be a fantastic show. The backlash of martyring Donald Trump, it's a real thing. The former president's mugshot from a Fulton County jail has given black men the space to abandon the cosplay of painting Trump as the second coming of Adolf Hitler. The trumped-up persecution of America's 45th president has turned Trump into the avatar for rebellion. Fani Willis, the Atlanta prosecutor, transformed Trump into Tupac, not Martin Luther King Jr. She unwittingly invited Trump to the proverbial cookout. The crude and now infamous N-Words for Trump 2024 t-shirt worn by Derek Gibson captures the sentiment of working class black men. Take a listen.
I'm here to support President Trump. You wanna know why I'm here to support President Trump? Because they done did black men like this for decades. Make up charges and put them, so I know Trump is innocent. I support Trump against this corrupt, two-tiered justice system. That's why I'm here to show my support as a black man for Trump. And I'm wearing my shirt for Trump 2024, and I mean that.
So, I'm not a fan of Gibson's t-shirt, but I recognize its commercial widespread appeal. It will be wildly popular. White Trump supporters will mimic it with slogans like Neighbors for Trump 2024. Americans love to rebel. It's in our blood. This Trump-led rebellion will only grow stronger. I say that because Trump isn't really leading this rebellion. He's just the avatar, the symbol. The fuel to this fire is a spiritual awakening, a realization that the political establishment has created a culture that is completely out of line with God's design. What's driving this awakening is drag queens at schools, the debate about gender spectrum, men invading women's sports, young children choosing their gender and being surgically transitioned, Hollywood elites pandering to the alphabet mafia, and the pervasive hostility towards heterosexual men of faith. It's impossible to deny the wickedness of liberal culture. The targeting and sexual grooming of kids cannot be ignored. The attack on religious faith is too obvious. Derek Gibson can't articulate it, but he just feels it instinctively. All men do. The black heterosexual man has been totally emasculated. He answers to the black woman. He's denied leadership and any position of real authority. He's been replaced by the black woman because she's far more easy to control and manipulate. Listen to Derek Gibson.
You know, Fani Willis, she went to school with my sister. She full of shit. She was full of shit then. So she's a puppet for the white liberal and that is controlling everything. She's in front, but the white liberal back there pulling those strings, telling her what to do. That's what I think about her, making a fool of herself.
Do you think it's going to help his election?
Of course it is. It's going to elevate him all the way. I think we should make Trump king. That's how I feel. We should make him king.
Wouldn't that be kind of like communistic?
Nah, that's nowhere near communist. Now, we're just going to make him king, but we still got our freedoms and rights and everything. He for that. Yeah, Trump for king.
So Gibson's a little bit of a comedian, but he's expressing in the sentiment that I believe, in my opinion, Gibson believes the exact same thing about Barack Obama's presidency. Obama empowered the LGBTQ and paved the path for 3 lesbian Marxists to create the Black Lives Matter movement. It was all a scam. The martyring of Trump is allowing black men to publicly recognize that the real battle isn't black versus white. The real battle is between man and woman over dominion of the earth. The real war is good versus evil, God versus Satan, the patriarchy versus the matriarchy. There are political consequences to this realization. Yesterday, I hosted a 2-hour discussion on Twitter Spaces debating whether black people will abandon the Democratic Party in favor of Trump in the 2024 election cycle. Several of the contributors to my show here, Fearless, this show, Delano was there, Royce was there, Shemeka was there, Maj was there. We had people from outside our little group, Sonny Johnson, Rob Smith. Who am I forgetting? Did I already mention Maj Toure? Anyway, it was a great, lively, substantive debate. I'm still not convinced, however, we're going to see a large number of black men pull the lever for Trump. The social relationship and employment consequences are steep for black men who reject liberalism. It harms your dating options with black women. It adds a thick layer of tension with family members and friends. Within the black church, it places you at odds with most of the congregation. It diminishes your chances of ascending to leadership positions at work. Many black Trump supporters have to overhaul their entire social circles. Wearing a rebellious t-shirt supporting Trump isn't nearly as risky as legitimately rejecting liberalism. What I think is going to happen is we're going to see an uptick in black men choosing not to vote. That's the compromise they'll make to keep peace in their personal life and avoid supporting Joe Biden, Gavin Newsom, or Michelle Obama. Me, I plan to vote for the first time in my life, and I'll vote MAGA. I want to rebel. I want to be a part of a backlash. I want to send a message to the political establishment, both Democrat and Republican. Regardless of what happens in the election, I feel a bit more optimistic seeing black men wake up to the fraudulence and wickedness of liberalism and racial identity politics. If the martyring of Trump contributes to the spiritual awakening of black men, he's the greatest president since Abraham Lincoln. That's my fire starter. Now I'm going to elaborate just a little bit further, and then we're going to bring on Shemeka and Maj and Delano and Royce White and have a broadening of the discussion. And if you missed or don't have access to or missed the Twitter Spaces we have, it was a tremendous, spirited debate. It wasn't filled with agreement. It was filled with respectful pushback going all directions. Hopefully you'll hear some of that again today. But this thing that is happening, this awakening, is very important. I initially, when I was watching, like, hey, everybody's just kind of talking tough, and the Trump arrest and the mugshot, it's a nice little moment, a nice little gimmick, or a nice little tool for the mainstream media, corporate media, to get some good sound bites and videos. I wasn't thoroughly convinced that it was something of substance. After talking about it last night, thinking about it last night, thinking about it this morning, I do think there's some substance here. I think this is a real thing. And again, last night I tried to explain, and we'll probably have the discussion a little bit again today, this isn't really about Trump. Trump just happens to be the man in the right place at the right time who symbolizes dissatisfaction with the status quo and with the establishment. But he's not really the driving force. And then I'm talking about it as it relates to black voters. It's the stuff I talked about in my mono that's really driving this. And again, Derek Gibson is saying something that was convenient at the moment. Trump was arrested that day. He wears a shirt, gets himself all over TV and going viral. He took advantage of the opportunity. But the real thing going on is the embrace of a wicked culture, a culture that has no respect, first starting with God, a secular culture that has no respect for religious faith And now people are starting to understand the consequences of that there's no respect for male authority, no respect for male leadership. And this is why I've said repeatedly to people that are on the fence or think that like there's no real tragic consequences to this whole woman's empowerment movement. And people, last night, there were people uncomfortable with the way that I engaged with Sonny Johnson on the show. Wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but there is a reverence, a worship of women, particularly black women. And everybody's got to deal with them with kid gloves, and everybody's got to pretend like anything that comes out of their mouth has to be dealt with a level of respect and reverence, or you're a sexist pig. I reject all of that. And again, I'm not married. I have more freedom than married men to reflect what we really think. But we've just gone too far with this matriarchy. And I've tried to explain to everybody, and black men are on the front lines and living this experience. Go look at black culture. Go look at what's going on with our young people. And then tell me, yeah, I think the matriarchy is a good idea. Anyone that doesn't understand that it's the matriarchy and this emasculation of men at the root of what's going on in black culture actually is a bigot. Because it's just black people. And it's just black women. White women won't behave this way. White women won't raise their kids the same as black women. Oh, yes, they will. And the grammar might be better. They may not be as loud as black women, but the result of the matriarchy will be just the same. And the result, and again, when I say just the same, you may see our kids engaging in, or black kids engaging in criminal behavior or looting or smash and grabs. But you keep going down this matriarchal road in the white communities and other communities, you're going to see more and more of this gender dysphoria, alternative sexual lifestyles, and eventually the hostility and everything that comes from people who are struggling with identity issues. And again, this all is related to when you don't, and I saw a great video that I should have asked you guys. I saw a great video of a white guy who confesses he was a product of artificial insemination, raised by two lesbian women. And this dude was probably 30. And he just explained like the consequence. Love wasn't disrespecting his two mothers, but just spoke eloquently about, hey, look, I had no identity. When you don't know who your father is, and he's talking about his father up in heaven. He's talking about the Most High God. When you don't know who he is, and then he's when you don't know who your real father is, when you're a product of artificial insemination, you're going to have serious identity issues. You're going to allow the world to define for you what happiness is, what your path is, what success looks like. And it's all going to lead to your destruction. This is what this white man, product of two mothers and artificial insemination, this is what he was talking about. And so again, when you look at what's going on with black people and black culture, and to me, black men are waking up to it. They're expressing it in odd ways, or they're expressing it not as precisely as I am right now. But they feel it in their bones like, hey, we're out of order here. This doesn't make sense. I'm a man. I'm now having to worship, cater to, bow down to women. And the women that I'm catering to and bowing down to, their solutions, their game plan doesn't make logical sense. And let's go look at the results. Let's go to the scoreboard and look at our kids and what this matriarchal culture is producing. Our academic performance continues to plummet. The gap continues to expand between us and other cultures that have two-parent households, man, woman, and child. Our kids are winding up in prison more often. We can't just write it all, it's just racism. No, man, it's the absence of the ultimate father and your worldly father. As a leader, as the head of your household, the Most High God should be the head of that man. And then the man should be the head of his household. And I'm sorry if that makes me sound like 1972 Archie Bunker, but it's just a fact. And I'm excited seeing men wake up to this reality. Now, they're expressing it in different ways. And they think it's political, what's happening, but it's actually spiritual. It's something inside of you that says, hey, I'm a man, there's a role I'm supposed to play. They've taken that role away from me. They've taken all the jobs away from me. They've taken all the leadership positions away from me. They've taken my child away from me. They've rigged up a family court system and a criminal justice system that punishes me. This is the matriarchy doing this. This is, and this all is the book of Genesis. This is all biblical. And they don't fully understand. There's a great opportunity for churches and spiritual leaders and faith leaders and ministers to run in with the explanation and take advantage of this opportunity. We're all sitting around having a debate about which political party is going to take advantage of this opportunity. What we should be concerned about is the church going to take advantage, the Christian church. Is it going to take advantage of this awakening that's going on? That Derek Gibson, who's in a politically incorrect t-shirt, a minister, a Christian minister, needs to be chasing after him. He's open to the message. He doesn't even know it. But trust me, he's open to the message. You bring him a strong Christian masculine message, he will bite. And so this isn't really about Trump and how many black people are going to vote for Trump or leave the Democrat Party. What I'm most interested in is how many black men are going to recognize in full what's really going on. And I'm optimistic right now that I think it's going to be quite a few. Because as you go look for answers, there's only one place to turn. There's only one place with the answers, and it's God. And it's an understanding of the Bible and the roles that we're supposed to play in this society. Men are supposed to have dominion over the earth. It's biblical, it's written, it's in Scripture. And that's being taken away from us, and we're all paying the price for that. And I'm sorry if that makes me sound like Archie Bunker. Women are going to have to realize it too. Black women, most especially. They're so drunk on the power that they've acquired and have been handed by progressive liberal Democrats. They're in denial that we're all paying a price for them being outside their role. So that's my take off of yesterday's Twitter Spaces and my take off the Trump mugshot and what it means politically. Again, I think it means more spiritually, and there's an opportunity here for those of us that are believers to recruit more men to our side. And once we get the men, the women will follow. Because trust me, it's in their nature to follow us if we're doing the right things. If we're not, it's going to be more tough sledding. And it's going to be more spread of the matriarchal culture and all the chaos and dysfunction and death and destruction that comes along with it. All right, I want to tell you guys about our great friends at Preborn. Did you know that every day Preborn's network of clinics experience 200 miracles? How? Preborn gives women with unplanned pregnancies a window into their womb through free ultrasounds, introducing them to the beautiful life growing inside. Once she meets her child inside her womb and hears that heartbeat, the chance of her baby's life doubles. Because of the generosity of you and me and others who donate just $28 to sponsor an ultrasound, Preborn can do this. The cost of a dinner to save a life, the most worthwhile investment you can make. All gifts are tax deductible and go entirely to saving babies. Someday, you may meet a baby that you rescued and you can give them a hug, or maybe they'll give you a hug. Maybe they'll even save your life as they grow and pursue meaningful careers. One thing is for sure, you will never regret saving a child's life because life is a miracle. Please donate your best gift today. Just dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 baby, or go to preborn.com/fearless. That's preborn.com/fearless. All right, make sure you tune in next week for our Fearless Cookout Fun Slinger edition. We'll be joined by Brett Favre, Warren Sapp, Seth Joyner, and Sage Steele. Our Fearless contributors, Steve Kim and TJ Moe, will also be there. That's live Thursday, September 7th, starting at 4 p.m. Central Time on YouTube and Blaze TV. Shemeka Michelle, next.
It's my obligation, no hate, discrimination, raising up your hands for freedom.
All right, welcome back. Time for some Shemoke Show. Shemeka Michelle was the official host of our Twitter Spaces last night. I believe the Twitter Space was Blacks for Trump. Is the tide changing? Shemeka, welcome back to the show. I'm going to start you out. I got to give a tiny bit of background. And so Shemeka has the suggestion of, hey, we should do a Twitter. We do one every week. We should do one on Blacks for Trump. And you mentioned that I think you saw a Twitter exchange between Rob Smith and Sonny Johnson, and was Maj in that as well? Kim Klacik was in it. Mm-hmm. And so Shemeka was like, hey, should I invite Sonny? And I'm like, yeah, invite Sonny. I have to admit I'm not a huge supporter of Sonny Johnson because years ago, Shemeka, 2 or 3 years ago, she invited me on her radio show to interview me. And let's say I was on for 20, 30 minutes. I probably talked for 5 of those 20 or 30 minutes. I can't remember. It was not an interview. I just listened to Sonny talk to me. And so I'm like, okay, heart's in the right place, but doesn't know what she's doing. And then she likes to talk, and she's very fond of her opinions, as I think we all are. But you bring someone on to interview them, you actually interview them. But anyway, Sonny's got her opinions, and so people last night I just want to start you here that you know, did I boot her off, or did she kicked herself? She just resigned from the deal because I started questioning some of the illogical things she was saying, and she got upset and said, I'm gonna go make my husband a sandwich and go and go cuddle with him. Was I too hard on Sonny? That's my question.
And so there was a noticeable difference between the way you interacted with Sonny and the way you interacted with the men. I think I'm used to it because I just think when you start directing your questions to men and you say, this is particularly to the man, you know, I want to ask the men in the space, blah, 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 blah. I'm not a man. So I automatically know I don't really have anything to bring right here because you've seen that there has been female dominated spaces so much that you're trying to provide a space for the men to be able to say something without women critiquing and criticizing, which we can do. Or, we will have something to say which will make the man back up. And so I think you're very protective of giving men that space. And I don't think that Sonny was used to that. So I do think that, we could all see the difference, but I wouldn't say that you were disrespectful to her. I think you wanted her to understand, this is my thought process. Men never have the opportunity to really get their points out or points across. Keep it short. And Sonny's just not the type of person that's going to keep it short. It may take her a minute to actually get to her point. To your point, as far as being on her show, I felt the same way when she actually interviewed me, so much so that I kind of felt like it was my opportunity to interview her because she was doing most of the talking. So I just kind of turned it like, what can I get from Sonny by just, taking my couple seconds to ask a question to just keep the conversation moving along, because she does talk a lot. And so I don't think you meant any harm by it. I did see somebody say, Sonny didn't do anything wrong. You just have a problem with women. And I don't necessarily think you have a problem with women. I think you have an issue with the way the matriarchy has kind of just taken over society in general, but especially Black culture.
So I'm going to defend Sonny here. We invited her on the show. And I several times, once the thing got started, I called on everybody, hey, jump back in here. And so I called on her to speak. The issue I had with Sonny was more like she won't answer a direct question. And so or she can't understand my direct questions. And so I don't know if I was any different with Sonny than I was, say, with Rob Smith. When he started out talking and wanted to tell a personal story and personalize the whole thing as if everybody was aware of his Twitter exchanges. And I mean this with no disrespect to Rob, but I jumped in and was like, hey man, let's don't make this personal. People don't know the background of what you're talking about. I certainly don't, and others. Let's don't make assumptions here. Let's just answer the question. Jumped in very early and pushed him a different direction, and he went that direction. When I would jump in, Maj Toure, and I gave Maj a lot of room to operate because that's what you have to do with him and Delano and Royce. They're going to take up a bunch of room. But if I redirected and asked a direct question, Maj would answer it. Delano would answer it. Everybody would answer. Sonny doesn't answer direct questions. That's what was frustrating me, and that's eventually what frustrated her. I wasn't asking her to, she made the big announcement, she's leaving, and, this isn't for her. But I just wanted her to answer the direct questions, and she wouldn't. But anyway, let's move past that. And you guys I'm on Shemeka's page or maybe on my Twitter page, you can find a recording of the Twitter Spaces, and I suggest you go watch it, not just for the exchange between Sonny and I, but it was a great 2.5 hour discussion. Shemeka, do you expect Black voters in significant numbers to abandon the Democrat Party in 2024?
What do we consider significant? Because really, to me, the fact that we've made changes, that we've come as far as we have, I think it was maybe 20% of Black men or something like that. I can't really remember. That's significant opposed to maybe 8% before that. And from my understanding, Trump is the only Republican to get as much of the Black vote that he has. So to me, that's significant. To some people, they may not think that that's a big deal, but I do think it just depends on what's significant to you.
Let me define significant then.
Yeah.
Let me define significant. I think that, let's say that Trump, I think they say he got 9% of the black vote in 2020, I believe overall. 9%. So significant to me would be him or the Republican Party getting 18% of the black vote in 2024. That would double their number, an additional 9%. That would be significant. Do you see that happening?
I think it's very possible. From what I'm seeing from people and what I'm hearing from even people that I know, I think it's very possible. And as we talked about last night, I think that there are things that the GOP could do if they wanted to make sure that that was a solid yes. But I don't even know if that has to take place. I loved last night when you said, how tough are we? Are we really prepared to be in politics? Because it's a tough game and we got to have thick skin. And I loved when Royce said, I don't even like the idea of courting the black vote. It sounds feminine, like I need somebody to, I appreciate that, because I think we don't even necessarily have to have the GOP pander and go above and beyond. I think if those of us like you, like myself, Royce, Maj, everybody on that space last night, stick to policies and values, I think that there are enough intelligent black people that can put emotions aside and say, look, my bank account needs Trump in office. Everybody that I know right now is hurting economically, as far as they notice the gas is high, the food is high. I think if we focus on policies, to act as if black people can't do that, to me, is demeaning, it's condescending. And so I do think that without Trump doing the electric slide or the GOP having hot sauce in their bag, that black people can say, this is more beneficial for my family, and this is what I'm going to do. So I do think we can reach those numbers.
I'm really glad you brought up the point. You really captured what a lot of last night's discussions centered around. And it perfectly segues, because Maj is going to follow you in, and it sets up my conversation with Maj greatly, because we were having an argument about GOP strategy and whether or not the GOP or Republicans or their pundits, whether they say things that are inappropriate and are off-putting to black voters, and that's why the Republican Party can't capture the black vote, because they say blacks are on the Democrat plantation, or they say this word or that word, or they tweet this thing or that thing, and black voters crumble. And my argument last night and every day is like, are we really this weak? That we don't understand what politics are, that it's a combat sport, and that, a real combat sport where presidents get killed, and white politicians say all kinds of crazy things about white politicians and white voters, and Hillary called Trump's voters deplorables or whatever. And so I'm just like, we have to recognize what politics is, to thicken our skin and just focus in on the issues and the policies, and let's quit. And the argument I kept trying to make that I'm not sure if they fully wanted to deal with, and we'll get Maj on this again today, is like, we're setting up a standard for black voters that, well, as long as the Republicans don't say something you consider insensitive, then you can vote for them. But if they say something you consider insensitive, don't vote for them. In politics, insensitive things are going to be said. Joe Biden went on to the Breakfast Club and said, you ain't black if you don't vote for me. That was insensitive. Black people still voted for him. Mm-hmm. Which policies are you interested in? What are you going to support? It has to just come. We got to remove emotions and feelings from this equation in total.
Jason, I think that some people are that sensitive. They are that weak. I've seen so many people say, I don't mind Trump, as a president, but as a man, I just think he could have done some different things or said different things or been a little nicer. And I think that's stupid. For me, I didn't need to come to the light because somebody was pandering to me. I was able to say, these are my values, and they line up more with conservative values. So no matter who is over there, if their values line up with mine, that's the way I'm going to vote. And so I constantly tell people all the time, especially women, what are you looking for? Because let's be honest, your husband a lot of times don't like you. Your man don't like you. He'll go and sit at the bar and have a couple drinks before he come home, and then sit in the alleyway for sit in the driveway for an hour before he comes in the house because he don't like you. Yet you want these politicians to pander to you and to make you feel good. I think that goes back to the matriarchy, us just wanting people to be constantly in their emotions, constantly in their feelings. And not only women want that, we've conditioned men to say the same stupidity. It's really dumb to think that these politicians have to be cuddling or coddling to us. It's silly. And so, no, we don't need them to do this. But yes, people are weak. And what they have to understand is I'm weak, and they need to be honest and say, I'm weak. And we as pundits or whatever need to acknowledge they are weak. But it's silly, and we should not fold to them. It's just like the woman that says, well, I need you to text me throughout the day so I can know that you're thinking about me. That's stupid. And I don't think men should bow to women that feel that way. You know how my great grandmother knew her husband was thinking about her? When he came home. When he made sure the bills were paid, when he made sure they had food to eat. Now we want men stopping the work that they're doing in the middle of the day to text us so that we feel good. It's silly, and we should not bend to that, and nor should politicians bend to lick us and make us feel nice and soft and fluffy. It's just silly. And if your bank account matters to you, if the health of your family matters to you, that's what you're going to focus on. I don't need you to make me feel good. I got somebody else to do that.
Thank you, Shemeka. Great job. You can email me and us at fearlessblazeshow@gmail.com. Maj Toure. Next. All right, welcome back. One of the stars of last night's Twitter Spaces was Maj Toure from Black Guns Matter. Maj taking some time out of his schedule to join us today. And Maj and I had a really good exchange, several good exchanges about this issue that I'm going to hit him with again right now. Is my contention that we have to, as black voters, thicken our skin and move past any word slights or sensitivity issues as it relates to politics. Politics is an insensitive combat sport. And if you're going to bring your feelings into it, you're always going to make a bad decision. We must focus completely on policy and not insensitive words, misspoken words, analogies we don't like or pretend to don't like. I just think we have to focus in on policy. And if we get there, we'll start making better political decisions. Maj, you say what to that?
I say that I agree somewhat and I disagree somewhat. I think that if, again, like we were talking about last night, if you're vying for this job for me, you need to speak to me the correct way. You need to lean in with respect. Now, there's a difference between someone sharing a harsh truth that I may not like how it makes me feel per se, but it's actual. there can be a harsh truth in that person not actually trying to be disrespectful. I think that what happens a lot of times is people that are saying they want the black vote are actually not doing any work to actually get the black vote, meaning going out into the community, meaning doing the work that is necessary for the community. I saw something today where AOC is out there in the community helping folks sign up to get extracurricular, voluntary coaching and tutoring for the students, helping the parents link up with those actual tutors. Now, do I think that AOC's policies are great for our community? Absolutely not. But what we're talking about is she's doing the type of outreach that's necessary. So if you're doing the outreach, you're doing the work, and you're vying for a position, and you think that your job is actually being rude to your actual constituents, you're wrong. Now, this does not mean, again, this doesn't mean we're selling people something that we don't believe in. I don't want you to say, black people are in a great state, the economy's great, we have great leadership under President Biden, you guys are awesome, and then you create policy and legislation that's exactly the opposite. I'm saying tell those harsh truths, but I have to be able to point to where you are actually doing community work. And I contend that most of the people that are critical of black people do no outreach, do no work, have no policy or legislation that's actually in alignment with the things that they say would benefit that community. And they actually, in all belief, don't think that they can actually get the black vote. They just say rude things that other conservatives may agree with as they're kind of like going up the political ladder. If they say rude things here, maybe they'll get a look on the gubernatorial level. If they say things that are debunked statements about the black community, maybe they'll run for a presidential election. This is from a group of people that want to attempt to say we need black people to come out, but they're not interested in actually presenting any legislation or policy or do any community work that would make that community say, you know what, this is our guy, this is our lady.
So, Maj, I don't want to defend those people, but I do want to ask you questions that they may be afraid to ask because they're walking on eggshells, don't want to be accused of racism, whatever. And so I think one of the questions they would ask, like, man, I feel like I'm in a catch-22. If I go to those communities, I don't live in those communities. If I go and if I provide help or whatever, I could end up like the Tuohys, and I'm the white savior. The Tuohys are the people that are into it with the former NFL player Michael Orr from the movie The Blind Side. And the next thing you know, I'm being accused of being a white savior, not someone that's or what do you mean? You're trying to turn me into you. You're trying to push your values onto me. I think some of these people, inappropriately or accurately, feel like they're in a tough catch-22. If I bring my values and my thought structure to your community and you decide, hey, your Christian values, that's white supremacy, that you use those values to enslave us, it makes people reluctant to, like, man, if I go down there talking what I believe, I'm gonna get accused of, forcing my beliefs onto them.
Well, there's several things to that. I've had white followers that wear our merch from blackgunsmattershop.com, right? They'll hit me up and say, yo, Maj, I can't wear a shirt that says Black Guns Matter. And I go, why not? And they'll say, they're going to think I'm making fun of, I know where you're coming from, Maj. They're going to think that I'm making fun of the phrase Black Lives Matter. And I have a genuine conversation with those white followers. And then they wind up getting the merch. And then they say, man, I had so many conversations in this demographic. All of the black people that I ran across was like, yo, man, we love that shirt. Where'd you get it from? And then it's an opportunity to have a discussion about what Black Guns Matter actually is. Here's the thing. If you are vying for a political position, that you are in a catch-22. First of all, you mostly get rid of your voice. The job of a public servant is to speak for his or her constituents. You can share what your beliefs are, and that's just communicating. So if you happen to be Christian, well, good news for you. Most black people in the hood identify as Christian. So you got no issues there. I don't see where the teachings of Jesus or those parables and those examples run contrary to what people say they are in Black communities. So that's number one. That's why the Christian church.
Hold for 1 second. I remember where you're at. I just want to offer this tiny bit. For me as an athlete, I've seen coaches get criticized by Black players for reading Bible scriptures. I think at some school, a guy lost his job over it. Mm-hmm. And so they're in this new society, particularly dealing with these young people, there is some risk to sticking to the Bible. I know it because to some degree, I pay that price.
Okay, and so did Jesus. And if we Christ-like, that's the sacrifices that you have to make. I mean, we said this thing was going to be worth it. We didn't say it was going to be easy. And extreme leftists ain't going to make it easy. And so with that being the case, if you can articulate, if someone presents it that way, because I've had those same white followers say, yo, one of the guys out of the 6 that I ran across was like, yo, you making fun of BLM, came in with that statement and saying, oh, absolutely not. We're about Black people and firearms ownership in the Black community for a safe and responsible way. So the government isn't overreaching, so you aren't getting victimized by criminals in your community. If that public servant can't articulate their message and they're afraid to do it because they think they're going to get some pushback, well, then that public servant isn't thick-skinned enough to have the job. That's what the job is. All of your constituents are not going to agree with you. Your job is to be able reasonably, because I'm not saying we're supposed to pander to extreme leftists to make them all feel better. I'm not saying it that way. But generally, if I get out there with a well-crafted message and say, hey, I don't know what everybody else's value system is. I think that there's universal principles that are in the Bible, but whatever your faith is, I think we're all trying to get to the right place. That's a PR statement that's universally accepted. So they have to figure out ways to craft that without pandering. And at the same time, like you said yesterday, it is a contact sport. They should be expecting contact. When you can articulate these things directly, Trump was amazing at it. The example that I gave last night was in Detroit when he was campaigning in 2015, 2016. He's in Detroit. He says, you got no jobs. You go outside, you get shot. A vote for me. What have you got to lose? That was not a pander. That was not dishonest. It was not disrespectful. It's just a matter-of-fact statement that comes from a place that you actually are. The problem is these guys are trying to craft this narrative or this caricature that we can see through. I don't believe Vivek on anything. Vivek and Hillary Clinton, to me, look exactly alike. They have a pander energy, like they're acting. I do not believe it. Getting on stage and I don't need my presidential candidate rapping Eminem to me. I don't need. If Donald Trump gets up there, he's doing his 2-step at the end of the thing, and that's it. That's it. My point in saying this is there's a difference between something that you actually are. You stand on 10 toes down. You can articulate this to your constituents, and these are your values, as well as asking what they need from you because you're a public servant. That balance is undefeated, but you're absolutely going to run into some people that's going to ask you questions. You have to have the skill set to be able to answer them fully, honestly, genuinely, and do the job.
Maj, I'm not sure if you and I talked about this last night, but it is something I definitely want to ask you about. My contention that I'm a little suspicious of how many Black voters are actually going to transition or even be open to a Republican message, because I think there's so much risk to your social circle, to your church life, to your relationship with your woman. And so I want your reaction to that when you walk away or reject liberalism, there is a price to pay in your social life as a Black man.
I think there would be more of a price to pay if you're not well versed in what our nation is. Our nation is a constitutional republic. If you're not well versed in who I deem the best conservative or Republican of all time, which is Frederick Douglass, and telling his story. If you're not informed about that and you're not explaining thoroughly, just like that politician, if you're not saying, hey, man, I don't know, man. I can't take more of this economy's getting rough. It looked a little bit different. And in the hood, we accept harsh truths. If you say, listen, if it's horrible or if we disagree under Republicans or Democrats, at least during the Republican administration, the last one, there was money flowing. Now the gas prices are high again. Now the economy's tight. You have to be able to articulate in any position that you are, public servant, just regular man, saying, I'm making this decision. When you can articulate those things thoroughly, and if your fear of not doing it is because there will be some pushback, you're more of a coward than a man. So this conversation that people won't be able to receive what you're saying, I have friends that are extreme leftists, that are anti-gun. When I go into their home out of respect for the value system of property rights, I don't take a firearm into their home. Then when I start to communicate with them about the importance of being armed, so forth and so on, when a situation happens, like when the Biden administration says, we shutting down grocery stores, that American, that friend of mine, reaches back out to me and says, Maj, they said they closing down the grocery stores. You've been saying these things for some time now. What should I do next? That is where we win. When we fail to articulate our reasoning and be bold enough to take what comes with it, as well as still being respectful to other humans and other Americans, that's where we fail. If we've done those things and we're educating about the history of the Republican Party in conjunction with new information that we found about the Republican Party, as well as what we've noticed about the Democrat Party, if we've done that from an informed and articulate position, there is absolutely no way logically that someone can be upset with you. And if they are upset with you, they have the right to be that way. And we get to say, okay, cool. But I promise you, everybody that talk that, oh, I hate guns, but when the zombie apocalypse comes, the first thing that they say is, man, if something go wrong, I'm coming to your house, because they know that you're actually right. They're just not brave enough to actually deal with how right you are.
Very quickly, that what you're describing, I agree. Get informed, know the arguments, but that's to some guy that's got a wife, 3 kids, maybe a parent that's ill or what. That's a whole bunch of work, man. All I gotta do is go in here and pull this Democrat lever and be done with it, and I ain't gotta think about it. What Maj is talking about, like, that's an extra layer of work that maybe he just don't want to deal with.
When the underlings to Pharaoh saw that the plagues and Moses said what was going to happen, and the underlings came to Moses and was like, hey, man, Pharaoh really wants to get with you, but we're coming, like, hey, can you just cool out on the frogs? And Moses said, listen, bro, have Pharaoh come holler at me and let my people go. Or he's choosing he likes those frogs more than he wants to actually be from under these issues. So the same thing here. If you're a man and you don't like the discomfort that your current political situation is doing, and you're the leader of your household, and if you can't come up with a way to keep the peace or communicate your family in a different direction, you've already, 1, failed as a leader, and 2, voting can be private. Voting can be private. You cannot talk about it if you choose to. That's the other thing. As well as you're just choosing to not be in a space where you can lead your people in the direction that they need to go. That means you're choosing the easy way out. And that is not a solid sign of what men do. Every day we do hard jobs. We have very little, support and celebration for it. That is a part of being a man. If that just means my family's going to be upset with me for a little bit, and we can have dialogues at Turkey Day and Thanksgiving, and that's all I get about it from being right in those exchanges, then that's what we do. But as men, if you've made the decision to lead your people, I love the Jewish community when they don't separate their politics, their economics, and their culture. If you're trying to ban your politics, your economics, and your culture together, and you articulate that to your family, and you've already been a solid husband, father, and leader, your family's going to go there. The only thing that's stopping you is fear, and that ain't Christ-like either. So they got a decision to make, and it's a hard one, But hopefully men with some strong will can make the right decision.
Thank you, Maj. Great job as always. Make sure you guys are leaving comments in the comment section about this conversation. Delano Squires next. All right, welcome back. Let's bring in Professor D, who was another one of the stars of last night's Twitter Spaces, ended the Twitter Spaces on an incredible note when we were discussing about whether black voters are really considering leaving the Democrat Party. Delano, I thought, put a great bow on the entire conversation, made it a profound point, and I want to start there, Delano, with you unpacking what you did at the end last night about what we as black people want to take from our ancestors and what we want to reject or ignore about our ancestors' legacy.
Sure. So Jason, I talked about how for a lot of black folk nowadays, all of the talk around our ancestors focuses on their pain and their trauma. And what I said is that for many of the people I'm thinking about, they reject the faith of their ancestors, particularly the Christian faith of their ancestors. They reject their moral values. They reject their family structure. They reject household order. They reject their modesty and style of dress and self-respect. The only thing that many people, particularly black folk in this generation, want from their ancestors is access to their pain and trauma, because they know that that pain and trauma have value in today's political culture, because they can turn that pain and trauma into a moral claim specifically for reparations. And I see that more and more with people who in one breath will say, I'm not my ancestors, like, don't mess with me, I'll give you a knuckle sandwich. And then in the next breath say, oh, I am my ancestors, pay me because of what happened to them. And what I said is I think that type of conduct and behavior is despicable, and I don't think people should engage in it.
So a lot of our conversation last night where there was friction and tension, and I'm talking about overall, not particularly between you and I, but revolved around my contention that, hey, we got to toughen our skin up. We can't keep using these excuses of, oh, this person tweeted something inappropriate, this person said something I didn't like, therefore I'm going to reject conservative views and conservative values because they said X, Y, or Z. And my point is like, whoa, in politics, people say insensitive things all directions, all the time. That's the nature of politics. And then my real concern is, because this was a group of conservatives or libertarians, Maj and his followers, it was having a conversation. And so we were already past that hurdle and we're willing to walk to the beat of a different drum. But by arguing and all constantly on the hunt, this conservative said this wrong, this conservative did this wrong, we're actually providing liberals and leftist blacks the excuse they need to quit, to not make the hard decision and to really evaluate what they're doing. That's the stand. I think we're setting a bad tone and providing people an excuse not to look and dig deeper.
So I think there's a few things that come to mind. One is that I believe that politicians may insult one another, but insulting your voters is typically not a particularly good strategy. And you see this, black women are the most loyal voters to the Democrat Party. And Democrats will say, black women save democracy. Black women are the backbone of our country. When black women lead, everybody wins. So they do it so often that people have a term for it, right? It's pandering. When Hillary Clinton goes on the Breakfast Club and says that she keeps hot sauce in her bag, and then Charlemagne says, oh, it sounds like you're pandering, and she says, well, is it working? She's doing it for a particular reason. So I get that criticism that in times past Republicans have led with insult or disrespect. And I make a very fine distinction between a hard truth, let's say, about the non-marital birth rate in the Black community and the effects that that has on every other social and economic outcome, and saying to people, you know, like I mentioned in the space, when you have a pundit saying Black people are political dummies, when you say that on Fox News on the first day of Black History Month, those two things are not the same. So I want to make a distinction there. But that being said, I do think all voters, and including us, need to develop thick skin. And I want to say it this way. Jason, you're the type of, you remind me of one of my cousins who can talk it just like she can walk it. She doesn't complain when people come back at her the way she comes at him. So when you say the things that you say and people come back at you with vitriol and insult, you just say, look, it's part of the game. But what you can't be is the type of person who talks tough when the words are coming out and then acts sensitive and curl up in the fetal position when the words are coming back in. And that's what I see oftentimes, even among Black folk on the left and the right. And that to me is the problem. If you want to be in the type of blood sport where you say, you publish headlines at CNN that say white men are the most dangerous people in the country, or these damn Karens are killing us, then you have to be able to take it when somebody says, oh, you know, Black teens are tearing up downtown Chicago again, and I think we should do something about it. You can't be insensitive with the words coming out of your mouth and super sensitive to the words coming into your ears.
So at the end of the deal, TJ Moe hopped in and made a comment that I think is appropriate. He's like, hey, white people are unsure, don't know how to communicate with Black people. And I don't blame them for that confusion. And one of the reasons it was talked about, I think me and Maj talked about it, he pointed to, well, the 2020 election cycle, Candace Owens, other conservatives, white conservatives, not just Candace Owens, were all saying, hey, it's time to leave the Democrat plantation. You're just a slave on the Democrat plantation. That doesn't bother me at all. Some people are using it as an issue. Oh, how dare they? You're calling us slaves. This is racist, and this is why I can't get on board with you. And so we can use all kinds of provocative analogies. We can millionaire football players can say Colin Kaepernick can say, man, I was drafted into the slave trade in the NFL. No biggie. Everybody's good with that. They use an analogy, and it's the worst thing ever. And so I don't blame TJ Moe or any white person saying, man, I don't know what I'm doing here. And I'm not sure if we can require them to go to some advanced university and get a degree in how to manage the sensibilities of hypersensitive people.
I do think that was a good point. And knowing TJ, I heard it in the most, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, because what I didn't take away from it is, you know, white people don't know how to talk to Black folks because, you know, Black folks are a different species of person and they speak in ooga booga language. I didn't take it that way. What I took it to mean is that a lot of white people probably pull their punches, are extremely, have a heightened sense of fear that they may say something that's wrong and hit a landmine and then be called racist. So because of that, they would rather not engage. I think there's some validity to that. I do. I do. But to me, for me personally, and I understand I may not be the average person when it comes to this, because I'm like you, Jason. I'm not particularly sensitive to the words of politicians, partly because I don't look at a politician as a buddy, a drinking buddy. And the other part, and we didn't even get to this, and if I want to press it deeper, I would say this. Part of what happens when a community is missing fathers on a mass scale is they lose the things that fathers bring to a family. And we tend to focus on the provision and protection aspect. And that is true. But the other thing that a father does for his children is that he affirms them. So when you hear Black folk needing to be affirmed by politicians by Uncle Joe and Auntie Kamala and Auntie Maxine, that's that part of our sort of the community's heart that's crying out to be affirmed, generally speaking, by white people, but in this case, by institutions that are controlled largely by white folks. So that sense of affirmation goes beyond, validating my interests as a voter. It's really speaking. People want to feel like a politician sees me, hears me, and values me. And that's typically what you would get from a dad. But when you don't have that, you project that onto people who you vote for because you treat them as if they're your father. And that's a problem. So for me, I just want politicians to be honest about their values, their principles, the things that they care about and are willing to go to war for. And then my job as a voter is to look at all the things that I believe, my principles, my values, and ask myself, which of these 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people best represent the things that I believe? And that's it.
So, final question, D. If let's say this is a pie that we're cutting into 2 pieces. There's 2 pieces. How the burden of establishing a set of values that you stick to and vote by, how much of that burden is on the Republican Party to go in and explain, hey, here's our values and here's how they overlap? How much of that burden is on us as black people to say, here's our values, and let me go look and see which political party actually reflects my values?
So I'll say it this way. I'd say 75% of it, if I'm speaking generally about the black community, and obviously this is not to any specific person, 75% of it has to be on each individual coming to a place where they understand what they believe and why they believe it. So communally, we have to understand what our values are. Because if we want to say we're a community and an actual voting bloc, then there have to be certain things that unite us in terms of interests. Skin color at this point in 2023 is a very weak bonding agent because I don't share any values with Patrisse Cullors and Alicia Garza, the two of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. So generally speaking, whatever they're for, my default is I'm probably against it. So it can't be color. So 75% of it has to be on the things that we value, our principles, our standards, and 25% of it has to be, and this is an important 25, on Republicans willing to come into our communities and vie for our votes. And we will know that this is successful if in 15, 20 years, let's say there is a shift in the black community and a presidential candidate is getting 25% of the black vote, not just men, but in general. We'll know this is successful if Republicans continue in the direction that they're going, which is moving away from their principles, particularly many biblical principles, right? Affirming same-sex marriage through the Disrespect for Marriage Act and using preferred pronouns. We'll know that this will be successful when black folks start saying, hold on, I thought when I was voting GOP, I was voting for people who share my beliefs, my conservative beliefs, my Christian beliefs. But if such and such senator or congressman is going to start calling Caitlyn Jenner a woman and saying Leah Thomas is the best female swimmer in history, I'm out of here. I'm either not going to vote for them, I'm going to detach myself from the system altogether, or I'm going to find a new candidate. Because then we would be able to say, oh, we are voting our values. And the one voting bloc that does this better than anybody else, I think, are pro-life conservatives who are willing to criticize any politician, even President Trump, when they start getting squishy on the cause of life. So pro-lifers are not saying, oh, I'm voting for this person because they say they go to church. They're voting for them based on the policies that they put on the table. And that's what I would love to see black folk doing so that we don't have this division where we keep saying, oh, black people are the most socially conservative group in the country. But we keep voting for Drag Queen Story Hour, and we keep seeing our mayors, Eric Adams, our governors, Wes Moore, the governor of the state that I live in Maryland, local congressmen showing up at Drag Queen Story Hour and waving the pride flag as an act of submission. That's what I'm looking to see, particularly from black men first. But if you vote for a black guy and he bows to the pride flag in office, and then you turn on the Breakfast Club, and they have the pride flag flowing behind them in the studio, then you know that you've been captured as a people. So the Pride Brigade has been trying to fuse Black identity with LGBTQIA MAP plus identity for the better part of 10 to 15 years. And BLM gave them an important beachhead. And now it's up to Black men specifically to beat them back and take back that territory.
Thank you, Delano. Great job as always. You guys watching, go to blazetv.com/fearless. Use the promo code FEARLESS, and you can save $10 on your yearly subscription. Royce White. Next. All right, welcome back. Time for some Royce White. Let's do it again. Royce White. All right, welcome back. Time for Royce White. Morpheus, gonna let you put a bow on this conversation. And I don't even have a great question for you. I just want you to, what is your takeaway? We had a 2.5-hour conversation last night. I thought it was terrific. I thought it was respectful. I thought there was great pushback going all directions. What was your takeaway from our conversation last night about Blacks for Trump, and is the tide changing? And then we'll just start there and build off that.
I think it was a great conversation. I think the ending was especially funny for me when the young man, I think you had just clicked off, but the young man hopped on and said, "Hey, Mr. Whitlock, Miss Shemeka, I just want to say I F with y'all's show, man. I F with the podcast, y'all. I know y'all from Fearless." I thought that was incredible, and it was funny, but it really couldn't have been a more perfect ending to a conversation about Blacks for Trump, and not just Black people, in some political sense, right? I mean, there's people who are political activists that are Black, and then there are the greater Black America. And I think that young man who jumped in at the end and showed his love for Fearless, and that he had been watching you and my podcast and other voices who are obviously leaning more conservative or away from the Democrat plantation, I think it's a great sign. And I think it's a sign of what myself and Maj and I think the young woman's name is Sunny and some other Black conservatives are saying, look, there's an opportunity here. Now the question is, that opportunity is a two-way street. Yes, the Black people have to change the way that they view their citizenship and their civic duty and participation, but at the same time, there is a political party that has deployed poor strategy in trying to allow, let's just use the word allow, Black people to come into the party or encourage Black people to come into the party. And my biggest point to drive home, and I'll continue to drive it home, is that the obvious strategic opportunities that exist for the GOP and the RNC and the Republican Party all across the country have been missed so often and so gravely. You can only assume that it was intentional or that it's intentional. And I think it is intentional. And I think most of the MAGA movement realizes that the RNC is trying to hamstring a genuine nationalist, populist Republican Party of the people. And it's not by accident that Donald Trump, that Black people love Trump. No, I shouldn't say Black people love Trump. Let me rephrase that. That more Black people like Trump than they like traditional Republican figureheads like Mitt Romney or George Bush. There's definitely more interest and more like for Donald Trump than those Republican Party figureheads. So it's not by accident that the Rhino establishment doesn't like Trump. They're vehemently anti-Trump within the political within the political rooms, and that they're vehemently against black people joining the party. I mean, the two things go hand in hand. Go ahead.
So let me ask this. Would you consider MAGA a nationalist movement?
Absolutely. I would say MAGA is mostly, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a nationalist movement. And
yes.
So do you consider the great mass of black people American nationalists? I believe we become black nationalists, but are we American nationalists?
Well, no, not yet. I mean, I think I've said this before on the show that black nationalism is one step away from American nationalism. And I think that the energy that still exists from iconic black civil rights leaders that promoted black nationalism, such as a Malcolm X, still rings true in many's minds and spirits today. And it would only take the Republican Party to allow certain black people into the party and into the power structure and into the outreach that they would otherwise deem as radical and dangerous to commandeer that spirit and energy that still exists in the black community. So, yeah, I mean, I think, I don't like that white nationalism has been deemed a dirty word. I don't like that black nationalism has been deemed a dirty word. We created a society, we created a country, we created a culture that prioritizes race. So people identify themselves through race. It's easy to do. Skin color is very easy to identify oneself by or others. And so, when I hear the term white nationalist or black nationalist, I only think of the nation piece. Yeah, there are we'll save the Chinese nationalists for another day because they, in fact, probably are still beholden to China. That form of nationalism is actually dangerous. But if I hear black nationalism or white nationalism or Hispanic nationalism or whatever the case, it's still nationalism. It might need some tweaks and some fine tuning, but the point remains: if you view your national citizenship as a cornerstone of your political worldview, we're in business.
Do you understand why some people that are American nationalists are like, well, hold on, a black nationalist, now we're injecting race into this, and that spooks me a bit. Okay. Again, they don't have your level of understanding. They don't have your access.
No, they do.
Royce.
They do. Now, I'm not buying it, Jason. I'm done with this. I'm done.
The average guy living in Franklin, Tennessee has your understanding.
Let me say this. I am unwilling to bastardize the intellectual capacity of the average white American citizen that lives in Franklin, Tennessee. I'm not going to do it. That's exactly what the global elites have done. That's exactly what they rely upon, and they rely upon that narrative. We need to move past that. We need to see beyond that. We need to reach higher. We need to aim higher. And I'm going to aim higher right now. Yes, black nationalism may be fenced off as a scary political movement for those who don't have a certain level of familiarity. But I'm here. I'm a black nationalist. I'm a nationalist populist, and I'm MAGA. There you go. Now, if there is this contingent of people out there in rural America who doesn't really understand black people all that well because they don't interact with them, or they don't understand Malcolm X, or they don't understand what black nationalism means, just ask me. I'll tell you. I don't have any problem explaining it to you. I don't have any problem explaining the similarities or the potential advantage of an alliance. I'm fine to do that. If you're not willing to hear an explanation, now I have to consider why you're so adverse to it. And here's the bigger piece. I'm not willing to hear out why you're adverse to it if the alternative is you would allow the Chinese to continue to make your antibiotics. See, this is the whole line that it needs to be drawn here. I mean, this is the line. Black and white people have been pitted against each other for a number of strategic advantages from the uniparty. We get it. While that's happened, the Chinese have risen up and they've taken control of most of what we used to call the American dream. The American dream is now manufactured in China. That's a big deal. And it's not just about the manufacturing, it's about the political capital that the CCP holds over our political elites here. And my pitch to the people out there in rural America who hear black nationalism and go, why are we talking about race? Well, the people who you get your antibiotics from, the people who you get a good portion of your steel from, the people who you get a good portion of your rubber from, they think in terms of race. So we can't have it both ways. We can't not want to deal with race when it comes to potentially forming an alliance that could help save the nation, but we are willing to kneel at the kneel at the podium or kneel at the altar of race when it comes to who we get our goods from and who our supply chains are beholden to. Those things don't add up. And what it really is, it's a symptom of our own lack of seriousness, right? It's all the wedge issues. It's all the WWE politics being put out there, and like a bunch of little sharks and piranhas, we want a frenzy around it, whether it's black people, white people, the pundits, the commentators, the political elites, whoever, the journalists, whoever needs to pull from that munch, right? Whoever needs to pull from that does it ad nauseum. I'm done with it. If you don't want to create a black and white alliance, sit back, shut your mouth, and watch the country burn. If you do want to create a black and white alliance, we're going to have to talk about race, and that's fine because we're all adults. We can do it. It's fine. It'll be okay.
I don't think people are fearful of talking about race. They're fearful of expressing their opinions on race and being deemed a pariah and unemployable and worthy of cancellation.
Oh, absolutely. I know that's the fear. But the bottom line is, if you're scared of being canceled, if you're going to be bullied by the corporatocracy, then you're a slave to the corporatocracy. So stop complaining. Shut up. Shut up and take it. Go ahead, bend over a barrel, make sure you're nice and lubed up, and let the CCP ram you at will, because that's what they're going to do. And the CCP, they don't care whether or not you feel the pressure of censorship or cultural, whatever. They don't care. In fact, it's a bonus for them. They love it. They love it that black and white people fail to come together in this country. Every time black and white people fail to have an honest conversation about race and the history of race and who played what role and what we can do now, what we need to do now, every time black people don't step up to the plate and just say, hey, am I a citizen of America or am I a citizen of a fictitious global community? Every time those two things happen on both sides of the playing field, the CCP wins, and they are winning. And I think people really have a tough time understanding just how dangerous the CCP is. I'm not a China hawk, but I see all these black people out there. Oh, it's such a good thing that China and Russia are going against the are going against the colonialist history of the West, and now they're going to disrupt the American dollar's hegemony on the world stage as a reserve currency, and they think that's a good thing for them and their dollar. It's ridiculous. Of course it's not. It's a terrible thing for you and your dollar.
So, Royce, you jumped into the space and immediately started talking about the importance of citizenship. You've done it on this show. I want you to go over it again, because this is the fundamental issue that we have to get people to understand if we want them to think differently. Yes. They have to start from the foundation of the importance of citizenship. Make that point again so that a baby can understand it crystal clear why citizenship, American citizenship, is important for the black man and woman, and how cavalier we're being about, hey, we're all global and open borders and blah, blah. We are the world. We are the children. We sound silly to me.
Well, there are a set of things that make up the fundamental value of your citizenship. Everybody's citizenship has a value. Everybody's citizenship of every country has a value to it. American citizenship is unique, and it's especially valuable because of a few fundamental things. Those are the rights that are guaranteed to us in our Constitution, not by our government or another man, but by God, which is what we have, God-given rights. That makes our citizenship unique. The dollar traditionally made our citizenship unique, although that's under threat now for a number of reasons we should talk about, but also security, right? And even more so the culture American culture, our beliefs. Our beliefs make American citizenship value, beliefs in things like justice, right? Or due process, habeas corpus. All of those things are in danger now. All of them are, they rest upon the edge of a blade, okay? Those things make up the value of your citizenship. And one of the things that is often overlooked by Black people and many people around citizenship and the value of it. What is the counter to American citizenship? I'm not talking about Chinese citizenship. I'm not talking about Russian citizenship. I'm talking about American citizenship. The counter to valuable, genuine, healthy American citizenship is a huge federal government. There is only one party that constantly votes to expand the federal government. Without question, the Democrat Party is the political party in our dichotomy that always votes for the ever expansion of the federal government. As the federal government expands, by default, your citizenship is going to be devalued. And we all, see, this is why I say there's an opportunity. You pull an average Black person, an average Black man, woman, or even young teenager off the streets and you go, do you trust the government? Their automatic answer is going to be no. Right? Okay, so why would we give the government more money so the government can get bigger and bigger? Do you want a bigger government or a smaller government? Right? But the Marxists have done a brilliant job of taking over the universities, which lead to the Black bourgeoisie who head nonprofits and grassroots political activism. And all of them have told the story that the government expansion is not the problem. White supremacy in the government is the problem. That's the scam. That's the three-card Monty. I use the term a lot, but the three-card Monty is Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, and Jamel Hill. Or Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, and Sean King. This is the grand three-card Monty that they're running culturally to pass off the expansion of federal government. I don't know if people don't understand that. It sounds complex, but it's really not. The bigger the government is, the smaller your citizenship is. The more likely you are to become an ant under the government's boot.
Here's the trade-off, and I talked about it last night, is the bigger the government, the bigger the entitlements the government can promise you. And so if you wake up every day, hey, the U.S. government owes me something, and in order for them to pay me, it has to get bigger. And I made the point last night, and we got to end on this note, but I want your reaction to it, and we'll take some time here. But is that the U.S. government's bribed, paid off the Black woman, and that is and the Democrat Party bribed and paid off the government, the Black woman, and that's where all this allegiance to the Democrat Party stems from. And there's a belief. Women want to be provided for, and they believe in the government more than they believe in man. And so therefore, bigger, better government is better than bigger, better men in their mind.
1,000%. I mean, nobody could argue that. Black women in this country, en masse, have married the federal government. And it's the same government that they say are systemically white supremacists, or that they are systematically racist. How can you marry? How can you take your citizenship and trade half of it? Let's call half. Really, it's more like 95% of it when you talk about surveillance and tech and what they're going to do with the cashless society and electric vehicles. And they're going to isolate the freedom of movement, the freedom of economy, and the freedom of representation. They're going to isolate them, and they're going to take away your sovereignty. Okay. How can you say that the same system that's racist and white supremacist is the system that you're going to marry politically? And Black women have married that system. Nobody in their right mind would argue that. And so we're at a place in this country where we have to ask ourselves, sure, there are Black women like Shemeka and Sunny and others, Candace and others around that understand what's happened. As a political strategy, can we count on Black women to have a mass awakening? I don't know. But can Black men step up and step out from under the shadow of Black women's political choices? Absolutely. And I think one of the men from the live the space yesterday did well to say, why do we assume that Black men feel pressure by their black women in the first place. They don't sit in the booth with you. I mean, you can vote for who you want. You can come home and lie and say who you voted for, or choose not to say at all. You don't have to disclose who you voted for. I mean, but I understand, and what I think he fails to realize is just how powerful the unspoken agreements of culture can be, right? I mean, it's almost men feel a sense of guilt or shame if they're sleeping with a woman who they know, who verbally speaks about her political affiliations and her political choices, and then you have to sleep under the same roof with her and breathe the same air. It's almost like you get shamed into voting Democrat by proxy. And that's happened, and it continues to happen. But the point is, despite all of that, the opportunity exists to explain to black men why the Democrat Party and the expansion of the federal government is an affectation of a womanly political worldview, a corrupt woman's political worldview, mind you, not all women, but certainly women that want to be lockstep with the government. And that devalues your citizenship. And here's the thing for black women. I'll leave on this. Hopefully I didn't say too much. I'll land the plane here. Yeah, the federal government is promising you all of these things, but let's actually take a look at your life. What black women will go on the record and testify that under the expansion of federal government, their lives have become easier. In fact, the entire claim from the radical black feminist movement is that they still live under a great amount of oppression in this country from the system. They're just not willing to say any of that culpability lies with their Democratic political leaders, which is just an outright lie. It's just an outright lie, and I'm not willing to follow people who lie at that level. All you black women out there, you can pretend like the expansion of the federal government has bolstered your position in American politics or the social status or whatever you want to, but the fact still remains. They're going to get you high. They're going to take away your ability to move about the country as you wish. They're going to take away your cash so you can't make purchases without their knowledge. They're going to surveil you. If a person or a system or a group of people has the ability to know every single thing you do and choose when and where and why and how to let you do that thing, you are a slave. I don't care how high you can get on the slave plantation. I don't care how pretty they make the trinkets on the slave plantation. You're still a slave. There's one party, there's one movement that is offering true individual American freedom, and it's the MAGA movement. If you don't like it, if you think all Republicans are racist, if you don't like those white people over there, join the Republican Party. Change the color of it. Change the face of it. It's open to you. It's open to all of us. It's open to every single person in this country to go into the Republican Party by the caucuses of February 2024, the caucuses, and become the representation of whatever community you come from and bring those issues to the table. And then we can really see if the Republican Party is as racist as all of these black women believe. I would say they're going to find out, they're going to be pleasantly surprised that there is far less racism in the Republican Party than they think. But the part that needs to be weeded out can only be weeded out if we go and force ourselves in. I'm a door kicker. I'm not waiting for people to come and pat me on the head and tell me what I should want and how to go get it. I have a vision for my own life. I have a vision for my own citizenship and my family and my future and my legacy. I'm going to get it. And that's what being American is all about.
Thank you, Royce. Great job. Tennessee Harmony with Virgil and Anthony. Next.
It's my obligation, no hate, discrimination, raising up your hands for freedom.
All right, welcome back. Time for some Tennessee Harmony. Anthony and Virgil are with me. Anthony in studio, Virgil via Skype. Anthony, if you could get us rolling with a prayer.
Father God, we're thankful for your word. We're thankful for today. Help us, Father, as we go through life's challenges, that we're always coming back to your word, your will, and your way. We're thankful in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Guys, we had on Vivek Ramaswamy on yesterday's show. He's running for president on the Republican side. Vivek's been pretty interesting and pretty fascinating. He's kind of come from out of nowhere. I think he's 37, 38 years old. Unique background. He's Hindu, or part of the Hindu faith. But he's been really strong talking about the power of the nuclear family. That has caught my attention. I want to play a clip from him yesterday talking about the nuclear family.
I said we need to stop aid programs that incentivize single mothers by paying them more when they don't have a man in the house than when they do have a man in the house who doesn't earn as much money as the federal aid would have. Right? They're marrying Uncle Sam instead of marrying the man who should have been the father, who was the father of their children and should have been a father in the house. So that means I don't blame individual mothers who are responding to economic incentives created for them by the federal government. I blame the federal government that created those toxic incentives. And I say this as somebody who I didn't grow up in money, by the way. Right? My parents came to this money with no money in their pocket, but I did have the ultimate privilege. I had a head start. It was two parents in the house with a focus on education and instilling in us a faith in God. If we're drawing up the plan from a clean slate, I certainly would wish for more kids in this country to be able to grow up in stable two-parent households. And I think the federal government should stop incentivizing the opposite. And I think in his heart of heart, RFK probably agrees with that. Probably some political consultant gave him some bad advice and he's in some experiment where he's paying attention to what they tell him to say. I'd say, man, get out of that experiment, go back to speaking your own mind. And I think that's why he's going to be most successful, where he's going to be at his best if he goes back to doing that.
So he's been hammering the message of two-parent family on the campaign trail, in the debate. He calls the nuclear family the greatest system of governance ever invented. And obviously I find it attractive and sit there and wonder, hey, we got a Hindu running for president that's hammering the family, and we have people that identify themselves as Christian, and they're not hammering the message as hard as he is. And so, guys, we'll start here. How should we as Christians feel about potentially supporting a man for president who's a Hindu?
That's where my issue would lie. Not necessarily from a policy space, but from the root of his theology. I'm one that believes, based on the Word of God, your theology, and that term basically means your understanding or study of God. I believe your theology impacts every other ology of your life. If I believe that God is sovereign, if I believe he is my savior, if I believe all these things about it, I believe his word is the truth, I believe the gospel, then that's going to impact how we vote. That's going to impact how we live. That's going to impact the schools that we put our kids in. That's going to impact every area of my life, my psychology, all of that. So the Hindu part is what gets me, because Hindu believes in multiple deities, multiple gods. And what, if we're leading a nation that aspires to be Christian, okay, having these roots in Christian ideology, when times get tough, what is he holding on to? I think Virgil may have mentioned either in another episode or even just in conversation with him, when he talks about God being real, which one is he talking about? Like from a theological space, from his particular faith. I'm glad that he speaks about the nuclear family, but even from a Christian space, there's more to it than just the family that he's pushing. From a policy space, that's going to be great to have somebody pushing for the nuclear family. But my concern would be where his faith leads him, because that's what is going to outflow his leadership and how he governs.
Let me ask a quick follow-up, Virgil, before you hop in. What do you say to the people like, okay, Joe Biden is a Catholic, and where his faith is taking him, he's pro-abortion?
Yeah, same deal. Again, my views on Catholicism, I find a difficult lane, because again, how he's dealing with and how Catholics tend to
Catholics are anti-abortion, though.
Sure, but they've made some shifts in how they deal with a lot of issues morally. So that's where, again, I'm concerned. For me, I'm concerned, where does that lead you? Where does your faith, your theology lead you? Because that's how you're going to govern. If you feel that I believe in this, but it's not that big a deal, that's going to affect how you govern. If you believe that God's word is conditional, if you believe that it is editable, changeable, then that's going to affect how you govern, because you're going to view his word a particular way. I don't. His word is the truth. It is the foundation for everything that we live by. So that's where my concern is.
Virgil?
I want to start this conversation here and just applaud the outstanding journalistic acumen that you've been delivering over the course of the last week or so. It's been absolutely amazing. The Larry Elder interview, the Vivek Ramaswamy interview, the Larry, who else you had? You had Larry. You had
RFK.
Robert F. Kennedy.
RFK.
Oh man, it's been just breathtaking, outstanding. So I just want to start the conversation at that point. Okay.
Great job, Virgil. You're off to an awesome start, Virgil. Thank you.
Absolutely. I may even get a little more times here. So now let me add to that. I think for the most part, I've never been one to ascribe to the idea that we are in a Christian nation. I've been one who said, and Anthony has even said this on the show, I think we agree here, people are Christian, human beings are Christian. Right. As a result, we see that played out in that Christians have a worldview that is informed by Scripture. And as we witness real Christians, true Christians, live out their faith in culture, culture is transformed by that worldview. So it's with that in mind that I don't have a problem with seeing us vote for someone who's not necessarily a Christian. Why? Because I'm not voting for a pastor. I'm not voting for the pastor of my church. And so this was the pushback with regard to Trump when he first got elected. How could you as a Christian vote for this man who's, had extramarital affairs and operates in the way that he does? Well, the thought process is I want to make sure that his view, his worldview aligns most closely with what I hold dear. Again, I'm not voting for a pastor of my church. We're not selecting him in that way. At the same time, I agree with what Anthony is saying in this regard. I think before we get excited about Vivek in this one area, and let me start by saying I've loved everything that I've heard from him. I've enjoyed his interview on the Breakfast Club. I thought he did an outstanding job going toe to toe with those guys. I've listened to him. There's a group of young men, young black men out of Omaha, Nebraska, or rather out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, that he interviewed. I thought he did a fantastic job with them. He is in more spaces and places than any other Republican has ever been before, and that's to be commended. He's unafraid of any area, any situation. But it is with that as I listen to him speak, he says things like God is real. And if he were being honest about his faith, he would have to say God is real and gods are real. And this is where it begins to get into what Anthony was saying, which is I've got to know what gods he's referring to, because when you and I hear God is real, we automatically connect that to a Christian worldview of the God of the Bible. And as we view the world, there is only one God, and it is the God of the Bible. Vivek, and if he's honest about his Hinduism, he not only believes that maybe Brahman is the supreme God, but that there are many gods in his worldview. And the reason why this is important, again, goes back to what Anthony says. I have to ask a question in a culture that is pagan by nature, that sees their own feelings as the God that they'll bow down to, right? If I feel a certain way, then that's the way that life is. If I feel like I'm a woman, if I'm a man, then that's the way. What authority does Vivek have to stand on if he believes gods are real when the pagan says, well, my God tells me that I'm a woman? Those kinds of questions have got to be asked and answered. And again, I've listened to Vivek in every space. I think he's done a fantastic job of articulating. No, I believe, marriage is between one man and one woman. I believe that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. All of that's wonderful. What I want to know more deeply than him being able to articulate that idea is what informs that worldview that he's articulating. You and I know that as Christians, our worldview is informed by Scripture, right? I want to know from Vivek, what is his worldview informed by? He said, his mom and dad, when he lived, at home, it taught him who God was. Well, I want to know more about that before I jump on the bandwagon and get excited for Vivek. And I think, again, he's he's incredibly articulate, obviously a brilliant young man. I want to know more. You know me well enough to know I'm not going to jump on the train. I'm going to pump the brakes and ask a whole lot more questions so that we can get to the root. Because if the answer to that, Jason, is simply pragmatic in that, well, most Christians understand that there's one God. And so I'm going to say God is real. And I'm going to leave it at that. If it's simply, I want to identify with the most people at a given time, well, that's a problem, because maybe the next space or place he's in, the majority have a different view or are going a different direction. So again, I say all that to say, I want to know more. I'm not saying he's wrong or he's not we're not to support him. I simply am stating that I think it's imperative that before we jump on the train, before we jump on for the ride, that we ask a lot more questions.
Virgil, you also seem to say at the beginning something that where I tend to lean is like, I've already said, like, hey, Joe Biden is a Catholic, but he supports abortion. So, and then Trump, I don't know what faith he has authentically. And so when I look at Vivek and I look at all these, all I do is, well, what policies do they support? That's the only expectation I can have of these guys. I can't put a lot of stock in whatever their politicians, whatever they say about their faith. And so when I hear someone coming up with ideas and policies in support of the family, I'm saying that's enough for me. You guys are saying, and again, it's not that I'm about to jump on board with Vivek, but I like Vivek. And I don't discount him because he's a Hindu. I just, because I think I'm like you, it's like, he's going to be president of the United States. He's not Tony Evans. He's not Anthony Walker. He's not John MacArthur. He's not Vodi Bakum. Those are the guys, I'm going to take a lot of my religious signals from. Vivek, I just want him to put policies in that are consistent with common sense.
And that's the shift that I think we made with Trump. When he was running for president the first go around, it was like everybody was saying, oh, look at his background and oh, look at his personality. He says these brash things, but his diehard supporters, they came to him with, I'm just concerned about policy. And where they have to kind of position themselves with him is they'll say, oh, I don't like his, personality. I don't condone all of his language. Yes, he could have said or did this better, X, Y, Z, but I'm concerned about the policies. Get that. That's where you're asking me, a man of faith, if I'm looking at candidates. Absolutely, I'm looking at policy, because that's the conditions in which we're going to live. That's the conditions in which he's going to govern. But what informs that position, which is what Virgil and I are saying, that's a concern for me as a person of faith, because I know when things hit the fan, when stuff starts to go sideways, when we fall into, or if we fall into some dire situations regarding war or things of that nature, what are you calling on to pull us out of this? And so often we have leaned towards, at least from a public standpoint for these politicians, God. And speaking of the God of the Bible, from a Hindu space, that kind of, okay, but if we're going to use policy, absolutely the policies relating to, and like you said, pushing family, nuclear family, absolutely.
Virgil?
Yeah, I hear you, what you're saying. I think we have a natural tendency, Jason, to want to separate The idea of our faith from government. Let's separate God from government, and let's never have the two meet. The reality is our worldview informs how we're going to impact policy. So you cannot separate them. With Trump, especially the first time around, I didn't.
Hold
I didn't
for one
vote
second,
for
though,
Trump.
Virgil. Hold for 1 second.
Yes, sir.
Hold for 1 second.
Yes, sir.
I'm not trying to separate my faith. I'm not. I'm trying to say family is the most critical thing, in my view, into getting us back on course from a relationship with God. And I look at so many people struggling with their identities, looking for affirmation from the world because they don't. Again, you guys weren't here earlier in the show. I saw this amazing video on Instagram. Looked like a 30-year-old white dude who's testifying, hey man, I'm a product of artificial insemination. I had 2 mothers growing up. And when you don't take your identity from the man above, you let the world define who you are and what makes you happy, and it leads to destruction and death. He's testifying. It was a great testimony. And that's what I see as the great plague of society right now, is we're not taking our identity from a relationship with our Father and in the earthly realm, and especially from above. And so anybody I see that has any type of passion for family, I think that places me in alignment with my religious faith.
And I agree with you. I know that about you. I know that you don't desire to dichotomize those ideas, right? I think those of us who truly have faith, want to live it out, are operating on the same framework. But even policy itself, requires faithfulness. And so when we think about the fact that, because when a president gets in to his office and begins to push policy, it's going to need to be anchored to something deeper than it was popular to say during an election. That it was the popular thing to say for the opportunity to hold the office. How is it informed? By what standard are the decisions for the family being made? You articulate them. It's because of the understanding that you have about being that we're created in the image of God. That the first structure or system that God creates is the family, husband and wife, and children and the like. You understand that your connection to wanting to push those ideas forward is rooted and grounded in the Bible and in Scripture. So the question is, I want to know from Vivek, I want to hear him articulate what's the grounding, what's the foundation, by what standard is he making the claims that family is important? I believe family is important. You believe family is important. Well, if in my mind a family is 2 moms and no dad, that's family too, right? Well, I know if I shared that with you, you'd say no way, because the Bible informs me that a husband and wife create children. I want to know from Vivek and anyone who claims to have a faith or hold a faith or wants to run office and are pushing policy prescriptions that will impact the family. I simply want to know how those are informed. I'm not saying that they have to be pastors of a church in order for me to vote for them. I'm simply saying we have to pump the brakes and ask important questions so that we're informed about where Vivek and anyone else are getting these ideas from. Are they anchored in Scripture? One of the things I love about what, and I'll toss a little bit of love to my brother Anthony. Whenever you ask him a question, what he's going to go back to is this: what does the Bible have to say? And at the end of the day, that's our framework. It's not that every policy prescription has to be book, chapter, and verse from Scripture. But the ideas that you push forth have got to be informed by and anchored in the standard of truth, which is the Word of God.
Jason, subconsciously, what you say about the family, even though you're not looking at, you do look at it from the Bible, but even making that statement is rooted in your love for family, the nuclear family being held together and the impact that it has, it's from a biblical space. The things that Vivek is saying, a man is a man and a woman is a woman, that can be argued from a logical and common sense space. But I look at that not because I just observe it. I look at that because God created us, male and female. The God of the Bible did that. Marriage is not, for me, does not have to be defined by the government because God has already defined marriage as one man, one woman, one lifetime. You don't have to give me a policy that tells me about nuclear family unless I already know God's prescription for us is that family. So that's where Virgil is saying, and we're both linking arms on this. That's what we're saying, looking at it. Yes, we support the policy. And yes, he's saying those things. Man is a man, a woman is a woman, a man and a woman is married. He's saying those things, but where's the root to that? I know where my roots come from, and I know where your roots come from. They're coming from God's word. And the Hindu space, not to say that there isn't, I don't know a whole lot about the Hindu space, but what I do know about it gives me pause to say, okay, wait a minute, is that the root to where you're coming from? Or is he even saying, which he has the opportunity to describe, is he saying, I intend to run and govern based off the Bible? Okay, I don't know. That's where we're saying, the question needs to be asked because that's going to be the foundation through which he pushes it, not through the popularity, not even through this is what we need to do. When Virgil brings up the exact example that I give, we've gotten so far away from family, we've gotten so far away from what marriage is, defined by God, that now when you say family, it could be a man, 2 women, and 3 kids. They may look at that as family. 2 moms. That's a family. Is he gonna, define that for us?
We'll end on this note. I want to go to 2 icons of my lifetime in the political space. One on the right, one on the left. Ronald Reagan on the right is an icon for Republicans. I believe he was a man that espoused some Christian faith. Barack Obama is an icon on the left. He claimed some Christian faith. Ronald Reagan, as governor of California, he started the no-fault divorce deal, which destroyed the family. Barack Obama brought in the transgenders and everybody else into pride and, the whole blah, blah, blah. So I've seen people claim a Christian faith, get in that political office, and do things that undermine the nuclear family and God's design. And so it's difficult for me to say, oh, well, this guy's a Hindu, and I'm more suspicious of him. I done seen Christians do worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and with those 2 examples,
alleged Christian.
Yeah, with those 2 examples, those who are Christians that look at them, they're challenging them on that basis. When you say no fault divorce to those of us who believe in the word of God, we're going to say, wait a minute, what does God say about divorce? And I understand what you did as, bringing this in as governor of California. I get that. But how does that align with this? When we look at, gays being allowed to marry and transgender and the whole bathroom situation, I know a lot of people who supported Obama the first go around, when that stuff came out, they turned from, regardless of how popular he was, it was because it intersected with their faith. It was, wait a minute, from what I see in the word, I can't go with that. So that's where I'm saying, not to say that they can't do those things, not to say that there are Christians who can't, who don't govern according to.
Don't even know what ground to challenge him
I
on.
need to know that foundation. Right. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Right. No,
right.
I think
Virgil, you didn't. No, Virgil. Despite the praise at the beginning, you did not earn more additional time. You better luck next week.
Okay.
Try a little harder next week. Anyway, thank you guys. Played some harmony, and we'll get out of here.
so divided. Stop fighting and stand tall. We used to be a nation, one united. Now we're headed for downfall. God, let your light shine down. What we need more than anything now. Harmony. Let's make a simple vow. Let's come together now. Harmony. Put all your weapons down. Love one another now. Harmony.
Time for us to wake up. Choose love, my sister, my brother. See through the lies they tell us. 'Cause together we're so much stronger. God, let your light shine down. What we need more than anything now. Harmony. Let's make a simple vow. Let's come together now. Harmony. Put all your weapons down. Love one another now. The enemy won't let it get to